So, Sarah, if you were only to be remembered by your words, what would they be?
It's so hard. I think the idea is like, and I don't know who first said this, but people don't know how much you care. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. In order to really help people, you have to show them first that you care and listen to them. And so I think that at the end of the day, as well, people don't remember what you say as much as how you made them feel. And so I hope that people feel cared for because things matter. And I think I've struggled in my own life with going through, does this really matter? Do I care about this enough, or do I care about, but I think people matter and I care about them.
There has never been a moment quite like now. People often say and feel the world is changing, but sometimes I'm not too sure. Is the world changing? Or are we simply for the first time becoming more aware of ourselves and the world around us? These questions led me to create Social Fabric, a podcast aimed at having conversations with thought leaders and explore the ideas that are shaping our world. T.S. Eliot once said, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time." My goal is that this podcast has that effect on you. I'm your host, Ramneek, and thank you for being here. I think I'll always be fascinated by the concept of perception. How we perceive ourselves, others, and everything in between. I'm amazed how often the greatest challenge we seem to face is within our own minds. What we have or what we don't have, whichever we choose to dwell on, in fact becomes our prison. In this episode, I got the chance to sit down with a very special talent. Her name is Sarah Hoag, and she is a phenomenal photographer and brand creative. She is in the midst of very exciting work around lifestyle and personal branding, and due to the nature of her work, she has been at the forefront of some ideas that come up for all of us, and usually in silence. Things like imposter syndrome, social pressures, cultural expectations. In this episode, I get the privilege of deep diving into a lot of these topics with Sarah. I cannot emphasize how much I enjoyed this conversation. I hope it has the same effect on you. And without further delay, I give you Sarah Hoag.
My name is Sarah Hoag. I have Sarah Hoag Photography. That's my business side. But I grew up in LA, and then through a series of personal events, I actually found myself going to Bible college. I got my degree in theology.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was actually thinking, this is something you don't know. So I've always been someone who...
philosophical?
Heavily thinks about the world. And my thought was, so I was raised in a Christian home.
Okay.
Very tumultuous in some ways,
Right.
And my dad never went to church really. He just, and my mom was always in church.
Sure.
And so we had kind of this divide because my parents were separate but living in the same home. So, and my mom was a health food nut, and my dad was a junk food.
Right. So he was
Yes.
whatever, and yeah.
So it was they couldn't be more opposite. My dad was very intelligent though, so he knew everything you could ask him about just about anything. And so I, into college, had this feeling of, okay, if I say I believe this and I don't know enough about it, I feel dumb
Yeah.
because I was getting challenged on some of the beliefs that I had.
Sure.
So I physically went to Bible college because I wanted to learn more.
To be more
Yeah,
versed in
I
it.
didn't think necessarily career-wise. I just wanted to go to learn, which was interesting. And then it was like, okay, well, because I had grown this group, I went to a pretty large church, mega church, and I ended up growing the girls that I was mentoring from like 5 to like 25. And
Okay.
then I was constantly with them all the time. And so people were like, hey, you got something going on there. I just loved young girls because of what I had gone through.
Right.
I ended up doing drugs at a really early age, like 10 to quitting at 14.
That's really early.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So that kind of took me on one.
I love how I say that like we all do it, but like that's
Well,
earlier than usual.
it is,
But it
but
is earlier in
it
terms
is-
of exposure to
Yes.
that stuff.
And I had older sisters.
Okay.
So that's one was 8 years older than me. The other was 3 years older than me. So a
Okay,
lot of
so
times
you were
when
the
you have,
younger sister.
yeah, when you
Okay.
have older siblings, you get
Sure, yeah.
indoctrinated
Yeah.
pretty early
Yeah.
to the party world. And so yeah, I ended up meeting my husband in college. We ended up moving to Northern California, San Mateo, just under San Francisco, and worked in a church there. And then my dad had passed away just before we got married, and he had a really great digital DSLR, one of the first Nikon, and I ended up taking that and starting my photography business while still kind of working as a pastor. I got my license as a pastor and worked in that facility for a while.
Okay.
And then started a business and was raising 3 children. So,
Wow.
and then moved to Phoenix, actually out of some trauma drama with church stuff.
Okay.
Came out here.
Okay.
And my belief systems have evolved.
Okay.
A lot of those. So I'm very much someone who I listen to all different kinds of
Perspectives. and what-
perspectives. Yeah.
yeah. So do you feel like you're just being in that community, the community you were in on a religious side of it, like something there prompted you to just reset? Is that what brought you out here?
Yeah.
initially?
Well, actually, my husband had really felt like the whole way it started. I'm like, I don't know what story to go into because there's so many in life.
It's interesting.
My
and
husband,
he's originally from California.
yeah, he's
too?
from San Mateo.
Okay. Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And so he had felt on his heart that we were supposed to move to Arizona. And that kind of was a catalyst for everything falling apart with our position in a church that we were part of in Oakland. We started a church,
Oh.
and it was 2 years in, and then
Okay.
it was kind of like the beginning of the end of our time there. And so we parachuted into Arizona. We're like, okay, so since this is happening, let's go now rather than in a year. Because we had
Right.
originally said, okay, let's take a year and think about it and what we're going to do and have a plan.
Right.
But it ended up him getting 6 months severance and us leaving.
Yeah. Might as well.
Yeah.
Use this as a catalyst to go.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So then that's where I landed in going, okay, what do I do? I have my BA in this. I worked here. I have this photography business. But I wasn't doing it full-time. I was doing it probably more part-time. I would get really busy. I was doing a lot of weddings. And then, I had 3 children, so I was raising them too. I didn't
Sure.
have them in care. And then my youngest was in kindergarten when we moved out here. And it was like, okay.
Chaotic.
Well, it was good in the sense I didn't have a child at home with me any longer where I was running
Oh yeah, because
around.
they're all kind of at least in some kind of schedule.
Yes.
Yeah.
And full-time, like full-day kindergarten. So I had them gone for a nice chunk of the day.
Right. Right.
For the first time.
For the first time. Yeah.
And so I was able to really give more attention to.
How far apart are your kids in age?
They're 2 years apart.
Okay.
So now they're 9, 11, and 13.
Okay. All right. So
but
they're
then-
kind of moving together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then they were 5, 7, and 9.
Right. Right.
And so it was like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then there was like soul searching on that level of, okay, how do I go about starting this business? And that's kind of
And
what
you
we-
always gravitated towards photography from just kind of tinkering with the Nikon and.
Like I had mentioned before, I'm trying to, I know other people aren't listening to both, but
Yeah.
I started the photography business almost accidentally because I had asked for my dad's camera. I asked my mom because it was just sitting.
Right.
And then when I started taking some photos with it, people started asking, oh, you have a nice, big, fancy camera. And so I started taking more, and people started liking the images, and I started getting into it, thinking it was a hobby. And I'm very entrepreneurial. Like, my jobs in college, I mean, it was a waitress, but I was also a substitute teacher for a while. I was a lifeguard, and I had a swim team for a while. I
Just
taught
like-
swim lessons, and
A lot of different.
yeah, and just always wanting to be able to make a dollar when you need one.
Sure.
You know, just always seeing an opportunity to make money
Sure.
when you could. So thinking, oh, okay, well, I'll do this on the side, but not thinking it was really my passion. Like, helping people and being of service to them was always my passion. And I used the church,
Right.
you know, was the vehicle that I was doing that in at that time. And so I felt weird about business, thinking that it was a separate thing, being money. Like,
Right.
and
Like separating the two ideas in terms of, well, if
helping.
I'm helping and serving people, that's a different world than business.
Yes.
Okay,
And that was
okay.
a big part of, reconciling those ideas of, oh, yeah, you can't help people that you're charging.
Right.
Which, I mean,
Sure.
now to me, it's ridiculous because.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a traditional, I mean, I would say that's still a traditional, like, sentiment.
Thought,
You know,
yeah.
like, people have that, like, oh, if you're a business-minded person, then there's, like, this connotation of, oh, they're kind of cold, or they'll choose money over
They
people.
just want
and,
something
you know, like,
from you.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
there's always that sense that, like, oh, this person might choose material stuff over people, and that wouldn't be a surprise. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
So,
Right.
I
Or
don't- I
their
don't-
business, they're not
charity,
charity or
yeah,
volunteer.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was like, oh, well, if I were really helping people, you do it for free.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which I read the book You're a Badass at Making Money,
Yeah.
Jen Sincero. That was the biggest eye-opener to my issues with money.
With money. Okay.
Oh my gosh, she's all about mindset and money, and
Yeah.
really kind of delves into those. The love of money is the root of all evil.
Right.
And she's saying, it's not love of money, it's greed. It's greed that's evil when you're wanting things for yourself. However, money is not evil.
Yeah. Right. Right.
And so I had to kind of break down where some of those thoughts.
I mean, because there's a lot of like, what do you call them? Like idioms, like sayings, like money is the root of all evil, like that we've heard for generations.
Yep.
You know, so it's like something you kind of say, and you're like, oh, that kind of feels right, and then you don't think too much into it. I feel like I had the same kind of reconciling, because all of my work always used to be around money.
Yeah.
Like I worked in banks, I worked around really rich people, like in investment management, like you're around lots of different personalities and stuff. And money always struck me as like a tool,
Which it
right?
is.
Like it's just a tool to either get something done or be able to do something you want. And to me, it always seemed like money would amplify people's personalities around me. So like if you were an asshole, you're really an asshole.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like
absolutely. They say leadership and money are the two things that will magnify.
yeah, it just magnified who people were. I'm
Yeah.
like, it didn't change
Change
that
you.
person.
It
I'm
just
like, that
brings it
person
out.
was always an idiot, and now he's an idiot with money. You know, like
Right.
it just didn't.
Absolutely.
So like it never. I always like, I didn't have that hesitation with the money aspect of it. I had more like, okay, it all comes down to the person. It comes down to what's going on in your head.
Right.
It comes down to where are you in your life mentally
Right.
and spiritually or whatever. That kind of will dictate what you do if you have the opportunity to.
Right.
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 So, no, I think that's a challenge for everyone. I feel like.
Yeah, but you're saying, but that sounds like a pretty healthy view, that you had a healthy view of that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I say that, but
Yeah.
at the same time, you're still caught up in the comparing material aspect of it,
Yeah.
comparing where you are versus someone else, your own ego versus someone else, all those things. Those still clash.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what Jen Sincero really points out is that it takes a lot of energy to be broke. And so what a lot of times when we're
Unpack that a little bit.
when we're broke, we're spending money, we're spending time finding deals. You're spending time figuring out how you're going to get something that you want. You're spending energy being upset about the things that you don't have. Stressed.
Right.
Stress is one of the biggest, stress and money go hand in hand of like, how am I going to do this to get this, or pay for my kids' thing, or whatever, or I can volunteer, with the booster club to raise money for my child's uniform for something. Well, you could also be working.
Sure.
Right. So there's different ways that you're going to spend your time
To get
money.
Yep.
And some people do it in a shrouded way that
they feel like this is the right way to do it,
right?
and
The non-sleazy way, or I don't know if sleazy is the right word, but like,
that's perception. Like,
yeah,
that's people,
absolutely.
People, like, right there, it just seems like it's people's insecurity of what other people think of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's the unconscious mind of, well, this is the only avenue, or I don't have money, so I have to do it this way.
Right.
So I know a lot of people like that they're kind of martyrs or victims of money.
Yeah.
And so these are the ways that I have to go about it because I don't have, well, guess what? There's other ways that you can.
There's a door number 3.
Yes.
Maybe 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think even just opening my mind up to that, and I stopped.
How did that feel?
Bargain shopping. Oh my gosh, that book has been so liberating, and just to be able to see it in different areas of my life, just what I'm doing and when I'm feeling negative about it, and kind of recognizing it and stepping back and
like now, catching yourself.
Yes, big time catching myself. Now, I mean, I have a cleaning lady now that comes all the time, and she's my favorite.
Oh man!
And it was like one of the best things I did for me and my business. I was like the best thing I could do for myself is hire a cleaning lady first.
They're magic.
Yeah.
Like we have like I want to say maybe we average like once a month. We just have like a family reset day where our cleaning ladies come and they just completely give us a reset on the house, and it's just like, oh.
I have her every 2 weeks, and then I hired an assistant, and now I have like my gardener coming regularly. All of the things that like before I would like do it myself,
right? And
it's like people do say that that's the number one way to grow, but it takes faith to say I'm going to spend money to make money.
Yeah.
And it's
hard.
Seems like duh areas, but they're big deals for you in the moment when you're making them.
Yeah. No, and they're commitments, right? Mm-hmm. You're increasing the cost of your just living before you see money coming in. Mm-hmm. So it's like, of course, you know, it's nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even, just shopping, just go ahead and buy what you're going to buy.
Right.
If you spend too much time like price comparing and going around, then gosh,
that's funny. Like, I don't know, some of my friends might listen to this and laugh because I used to be that way. They used to call me an impulse shopper, but I never thought of myself as an impulse shopper. It was just like, if I like something, I want it now, and then I'm done with it. Like I'm not thinking about it too much. I'm like, I like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I want that.
Yeah.
And if I can afford it, I want to get it, and that's it. I wouldn't think too much about it, like, oh, well,
maybe I can get it cheaper over here.
Yeah. I mean, I would do the background, like, all right, is this the best place to get that? No, if not, I can go over there and just buy it. I wouldn't waste money like that, but I wouldn't think too much about what I enjoy, and which wasn't often, but when it is, people will be like, wow, you made the decision right there and did it, and that would make people go, you didn't think about it that long.
Right.
It's like, well, I thought about everything else in my life for so long. Like, this is just a quick decision because I'm ready for it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's an interesting perspective.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
How does that play into, I mean, you started having these kind of liberating type, let's see, mindset shifts here in Arizona when you moved here?
Yeah. I think the biggest one being identity, and really kind of looking at who I am and what I believe and all of those things, and then making a commitment to educating myself.
Okay.
I think a lot of us get overwhelmed when we get too much information, but I think the decision that I made simultaneously is that I'm not going to be overwhelmed, and I don't actually have to do anything with the information right away. I'm just going to let the information come in. And so that's where podcasts and audiobooks and YouTube, personalities that talk about marketing or business or whatever topic you're trying to learn at that time, was, okay, rather than just thinking that I have to listen and implement right away, I'm just going to listen. And when you get enough voices going that are saying the same thing, I think that kind of carves out the path for you a little bit more, rather than just taking one person's advice to the bank. You're kind of going, okay, let me layer. And it would be, something spiritual. It would be something, just completely business. It would be very practical. It would be philosophical.
Sure.
I just listen to
different areas.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of different areas. And then you do hear this emerging voice, like, okay, all of these people
are leaning towards this idea,
are saying the same types of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of, not thinking small, but thinking bigger, or being able to look at yourself well. So
that is a huge step in just a lot of people's personal development. Because like what you're talking about is, like I think of that as like reacting versus responding. Our impulse is to react as soon as we get information or someone says something to us, but like taking a step back and intentionally not reacting and creating a response to it is huge.
First things that I was listening to was like Dr. Josh Axe for like health stuff. So he's a naturopath and he has all these great YouTube videos, and I think that's one area that's a great example of you can listen to something and know that it's true, but internally not want to do anything to change because you like whatever your patterns are, your pizza and whiskey and whatever, and go, ugh, like I know he's right, but I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so really quick, you're going to turn that off because you're going to feel
intentionally,
now.
like subconsciously, it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
I know it's right, but whatever.
Right. I know it's right, but I don't want to really listen to this because that means I'm going to have to be responsible to it.
Do X, Y, Z.
Right. But if you can make a decision to go, okay, I don't have to do anything with the information, but I do have to educate myself, then later you'll naturally do stuff with that information. You'll naturally kind of change because you stopped blocking it. And when you know better, you do better. When you understand things, you make different choices.
I mean, like you give me this sense of patience that maybe you've developed over the years from this kind of perspective that you didn't have before.
I think it was just like, this is the long haul.
Yeah.
Like thinking of it in big picture of, I am kind of an overnight, like, okay, I'm changing the world on Monday.
Yeah, right.
But
yeah. Oh, I know that feeling. Yeah. It's like, oh, this Monday is it.
And you're like so tired by like 1 p.m.
Like, why am I still up right now? Yeah. Down the YouTube hole.
Yes. Yeah. I'm going to do all these things.
Yeah.
And they're all going to be done. But understanding that it is the long game that we're doing things for. And so if we can kind of switch gears and listen to different topics or voices, then it doesn't wear you out. I know a lot of people who are like, oh, I can't listen to podcasts. I can't listen to all that because then I feel overwhelmed. I think that's the...
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people feel if think of like a conference.
Sure.
People go to and they get all this information in one weekend and they have the Monday blues because they were excited and all of that. And then on Monday they're like, ugh, implementation time. Right. What do I do with all of this?
I think that's this kind of space that excites me, though, because I feel like there's a space there where there's a gap between people that feel like they have ideas and just perspectives that they feel like people could get help from, or they could source their, be a resource for people, but at the same time, creating some type of presentation or way of presenting it where there's a real takeaway where people can implement it in a way where they don't know, okay, I know there's a huge list of things I wrote down that are great and it's in that binder and I'll get to it.
Right.
Like that's what, after all that, like if that's all it becomes is like a great 5 pages of notes, then it's like, what do you do?
Right.
Yeah. So like, where do you think that comes from? This like loss, like you lose this like this drive that you had during that time, and then all of a sudden you're like,
it's your brain's
like
needing to survive.
Okay.
And so if your brain is too overwhelmed and then it's going to go into survival, like we need to go back to the familiar. There's the the familiar past or the predictable future of like even just your habits in a day, what you're going to do today, and your brain knows those things to survive. So to actually try and change all of that overnight,
to fall into that pattern,
yeah,
again
your
is
brain goes,
easier.
no, like don't do that.
Right.
And so the wind out of your sails feeling, I think, is your brain's natural response. So some people have these huge experiences where they change dramatically overnight. We know that's not the norm.
Right.
It has to be one thing at a time,
Right.
slowly but surely. And I think one thing that you can change is the way you think. And so it has to happen in your brain before it actually happens in your body and in your life. And so if you make a decision to just change the way that you think by being more educated, the world becomes bigger, you know, and your life, the opportunities become bigger and the possibilities become apparent. You know, like you don't see the possibilities before until you start thinking differently.
Sure.
So I think it's the commitment to education. We know people that are so educated that do nothing with it, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
And then there's a saying like in the church world of being so heavenly minded, you're no earthly good.
Right.
You know,
yeah. No, that there's a truth to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
No.
your head's in the clouds and you're talking about all these things, but they're so impractical to what it actually looks like in people's lives that no one can use the information.
You know what? Maybe you could attest to this probably, and I think that's why people kind of think of philosophy as like this thing, like
Not
people
useful.
do when they don't want to, like
Yeah.
these esoteric, abstract ideas that
have an existential conversation.
Yeah. So like, I'm sure you probably ran into a lot of that in your studies then, right? Probably like people's perception of what you're doing versus what they're into and whatnot in school.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's across the world though, that we have like these people who are like philosophers and deep, big thinkers. And sometimes they write a book that is changing for the masses, but the majority of the time we just think of them as sitting in their study thinking.
Right. Yeah.
And like not doing, but I feel that now that's changed to more meditation.
Right.
And how to use the grounding methods to be able to actually change your life. And so I feel like the big thoughts out there are coming down to, okay, this is what you do with them, and then this is how you proceed. But you have to spend time opening up those pockets of your brain through conversation. I think that's why I like podcasts like this, where you're just talking about ideas and thoughts.
And more long form where you have the time to do it.
Right, just having the conversations. Those are some of the things I personally live for. They're most fulfilling. They're fun, whether they're at the bar with somebody that you don't know.
Right.
My husband will find me talking to
some random
stranger, about their whole life, or I'm the person that talks to the Uber driver.
Right.
And,
you're that person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, other times
true.
I'm like, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Depends on the mood, but I think you can have conversations with people in the most surprising places, and right away your kindred spirits, and you can
and it's a genuine connection.
And you cut to the chase, get through the bullshit really quick.
Right. And I think that happens more often in, like, let's say transit moments, like you're traveling or you're at a bar, because you both kind of subconsciously know, like, hey, like we've got like an X amount of time, so I don't need to ask you about the weather. Like, what are you doing?
I think there's just no expectation in both of those environments.
Yeah.
Like, whereas if you're going to go meet with somebody, you already have this, okay, this is what we're going to talk about, or I want to get to know them, maybe. But
I love that. I love that idea. Like, having no expectations is the hardest thing that's personally been for me to kind of work into my everyday perspective. And in the beginning, that sounds so cold and like defeatist almost, like, you've given it up. Like, he has no expectations.
Right. Okay.
But it's been the most liberating perspective I've ever held on to.
Yeah.
That if I go into every situation, whether loved ones or a stranger, with absolutely no expectations, that doesn't mean I don't have like hopes of things happening.
Intentions, But I think that's intentions versus expectations. So it's like, this is where I know I want to go, but how I'm going to get there, I have no idea.
Right.
And so that's the adventure part.
Yeah.
But you can keep on putting the intention,
right?
yeah, of what you want to see happen, like health, wealth, adventure, all of the things, and you can get specific about them, but the how, I think, is the big one that we have to keep letting control go of, because every time we try and control it, then we're back in our person trying to make everything happen rather than allowing it.
And when you talk about like these things like no expectations and this kind of approach and perspective, have you seen a change in your existing relationships with people?
Yeah, I mean, after we moved, I felt a lot of relief because the relationships that I did have, I really tried to put everybody in my back and carry them. And so there was a lot of...
You mean in the past?
Yeah, in the past. I think I was really trying to be everyone's savior, so to speak. Like, I was really trying to muscle my way through helping people. And I would get really depleted and really exhausted and feel like, okay, I'm not doing good enough, or I'd measure how well I'm doing by like how well I'm helping or serving other people, if that makes sense. I think because I had a rough time early on in my life, I had found who God was in me, and like that was so freeing, and I have still feeling this great relationship with God and who I identify with who God is. And so you want to share that anytime you have those experiences.
Yeah.
And I had some pretty earth-shattering life experiences that set me on that path. But if you're trying to do it, you're trying to muscle through, even though everyone else's journey is their journey, and you can come in as a guide and you can come in and help, but they have to do the work.
Sure.
And so if you're trying to help people who don't actually want help, or you're trying to do it in your own strength, then you're going to fail over and over. And so I think realizing after I had moved, I get to start over, and it's just really exciting to start over, to say I get to choose each one of the people that I have in my life. Like, I really made a decision not to have toxic personality types around me in
Just
any
a
relationship.
Blank canvas.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's pretty awesome. And yeah, I really don't have anyone in my life that I can't handle, like that I can't stand, or that is difficult for me, or that,
Right. They just happen to come over. Right.
Yeah. It's really awesome.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how many people can say that?
Well, I mean, you're putting a lot of intention into the relationships you want to build.
Yeah.
Right. From day one.
Yeah.
Which is a completely different approach, or not a different approach, but like a different circumstance than, coming to these realizations that you want to be this way and then changing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of growing pains if you're already in an environment that has created certain expectations about you based on what you've been doing for the last 10 years.
Yes.
Right.
Expectations being the operative word.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So
on myself, that I put on myself, that other people put on you.
Right.
You should be this way. You should do these things.
You've never done this. Why are you doing this now?
Yeah.
All those things. Right.
Huge.
Yeah. No, that's a huge. So how has that fueled your business now?
So I think,
and your work now.
I think like all of the discovering, so I transformed my business to be more photography for businesses, and I'm delving further into personal branding now, and personal branding being really more on the self-discovery. So it's really helping tie in the thoughts of who you are, what your strengths are, how you help people in the world. And so like even just hearing a little bit more about my story, it's like my passion to help people, I think it's universal. When you're a good person, we know there's bad people. You don't want to say good people, bad people, because we all have good and bad motives, within us, or there's no such thing. I'm going to ramble really quick, but there's no such thing as a good person or bad person, just a person who does good things or bad things. But we know that there's some pretty messed up humans that are selfish and self-serving. But I think when you feel that high well, a lot of us, it's when you're serving other people or you're giving back. And it's usually from a place of abundance and feeling really like I have a lot to share, or I've gotten this for me, or I feel this fullness and I feel this ability to serve others. Like that's, I feel like the closest thing to our purpose on earth. You know, we're meant to be in community with one another. We're still all alone inside, you know, so to speak. It's just you, but we're meant to be together. We're knit together. And so when you figure out your purpose through helping people, so to be able to help people do that multiplier, and there's a lot of people that kind of position themselves in that way. There's an exponential amount of growth to have happen. So I'm not sure if I explained that.
No, that makes sense. So like, I mean, the thing that excites me about your work and how we connected and whatnot was I kept, like with all the different things we do in life, in my business, as it evolved, as it changed and everything, there were all these struggles that I came across internally, like, okay, I've been doing this for this long. If I jump ship, or I felt like I was jumping ship into this space, then people are going to be like, oh, did he just quit doing that? And why did he stop doing that? Is he not is he not good at it? Did he hide? Is he hiding some flaws or something? You know, it's like all these like insecurities come up when you try to not necessarily change what you do, but like transition or add something to your to what you want to do.
Right.
And that came a lot to me because, you know, being in investments and whatnot, you become a strange part of people's lives where you see a lot of different dynamics going on because it just comes up.
Yeah.
And which led me to a space where I'm like, man, I end up helping people with their finances and investments and stuff. Yeah. But 80% of it felt like I was helping people with just working through their mindset.
Absolutely.
And working through their perspective of themselves, and you know, their perspective of themselves with their wife or their family, and you know, all
identity.
their identity.
And you're even talking about your identity.
Yeah.
In it. And, and so I think that's the big word that really fuels all of this. Even these. Yeah.
It brings it full circle.
Yeah.
You know, because that's when I was like, okay, well. Okay, I help people with investments. I want to get into the life coaching space because I'm already doing it. I just need to show people or showcase to people, hey, this is a part of what I can help with because I do it already.
Right.
And if I do that, then I don't want people to feel like, well, okay, now he's not into money and investments. Right. Like, no, it's like kind of interconnected.
And your identity is so wrapped up in your culture, like in the culture of the people, and what you're saying, is this going to be accepted by other people? And so I think that's the big change that we're seeing happen, is that we were not socially allowed to have these different job titles.
Sure.
And
Bingo. That's it.
And so now we're discovering, because we're told, well, you got to do one thing and do it really well.
Yes.
You know, and if you're doing all these things, then you're not really doing this one thing well. Well, I think it's more of a building rather than, of course, you don't want somebody to say they're starting a new business and they have 5 different services. That's probably a bad way to start your business. You should start with 1 to max 3 services in your business.
So you can manage it.
And manage it and do them well, and then build, and then add a service and then another service type thing.
Right.
But if you've already been doing something for a while and you want to add on another thing, I don't think there's anything wrong. And then you want to write a book, or you want to, you know.
And it's tough, though, because I want to, in retrospect, I want to say most of it I was battling my own perception of what I feel like people would think of me, thinking back at it, and which is like an absolute, now a non-issue to me, like thinking back to it. But at the time, that was a huge deal.
Right.
Because I'm like, well, I want to talk about this. I want to write about this. I want to do this. Well, how do I do that? How do I share this with, and people take me seriously? And then I'm like, well, why do I care if people take me seriously or not?
When I think this is the big thing is like, am I who people say that I am, or am I who I see, like what I know about myself? And how do I really take a step back and see myself for who I am, and get a like sober judgment on my strengths and weaknesses, and then create my job title, whatever that be, whether it's
Yes.
business, or create your job title. And to me, I think that's the same thing as your name.
Yes.
So your job title is
I
your
mean,
name.
That's what it came down to. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then it's now, what do I want people to know about me, and how do I want people to know how I help other people, so that rather than you being informed by what people tell you, which is important, you should listen to select few
and get feedback.
and get feedback about what people say that you're good at, or because you'll take for granted a lot of those things that, you know, like helping people through difficult financial decisions,
Sure.
or helping them put it in perspective. Even like photo selection, I remember people just constantly asking me which photo, and then I'd notice how much they're analyzing, and I would say, leave the photo on your screen, walk in the other room, you know, do something for 10 minutes and come back, and if you look at it and you like it,
then
you
you
like
yeah,
it.
because
And
you're
if-
too into it.
you're just staring at it,
Yeah.
and you've lost your perspective.
Yep.
But if you walk away and then you come back, because I guarantee you, this is what I tell everybody, no one's looking at your face as long as you are. You know,
Oh,
no
yeah.
one's looking at your photo, and what they're going to feel immediately is an emotion. Oh, I like her. Oh, she looks really pretty. Oh, he looks really, you know, whatever. So what emotion do you get when you first see that image, and then hang on to that and let go of, like, does my eye look a little weird, you know? Because you're too close to the screen, you need to back up. But we can take the combination of what people have to say about us, what we know about ourselves, and then doing the work to get the perspective on what we're good at, and developing areas that we want to develop. Like for me, the whole personal branding, I'm currently developing myself in this area right now, because I realize that is something I'm very passionate and excited about, but I don't have all the language around it yet. So I'm doing
Even in terms of how to communicate it.
Yeah,
right.
to really communicate it quickly and concisely, so that people understand what it is.
Yes.
Because it's still a new concept for a lot of people.
I
They
think
hear
it's,
it,
I
but they
think it's
don't know.
brilliant though, because I feel like that's where it's headed. You know, like I feel like that's where it's headed, because see that's one of the things, like you see different trends happening, and since you're paying attention to it, you're like, oh shoot, it's already here.
Yeah.
It's like it's already happening, you know. But when you really look at things when you start paying attention to things in the world and culture and society, if you're paying attention to it, odds are there's a shift happening, but it's like a giant wave. And like I always come back to this like scene. Did you ever see Interstellar? Okay, with Matthew McConaughey, when they go on another planet and stuff like that. But there's this one planet where they're on, where they're in the water, and they're looking in the distance, and it just looks like a giant mountain, and they're like, oh, okay. And then over time, like the water starts receding and stuff, and they realize that's not a mountain, that's actually a wave coming at them. And it's like a crazy shocking scene, because because in the distance it looks like a mountain, but they're on this weird planet, and it's literally a wave the size of a mountain. And all of a sudden it's all hell breaks loose. But like it's that kind of perspective where no, it's not, it feels like to you it's happening really fast, but it's such a slow moving thing for the entire conscious to understand, like the global conscious to understand the shift, or in any economy or any group, that you're seeing it now. And if you kind of if you stay true to that and create processes around that, then you'll find success, because you're kind of you're already making that part of your repertoire, you know? And I feel like lifestyle branding was that like aha moment for me. And then finding your work, because I kept saying, well, okay, I'm an investment manager. This is my brand for that. And okay, well, if I become a life coach, then what do I do? Like, is it a different company and this and that? I'm like, well, okay, maybe, what if I get involved? What if I write a book? Then, you know, I want people to, what if that book becomes its own thing?
And your book's more about thought, and it's
Right.
not about finance, you know,
Right,
investment.
at all. So
right.
I'm like, oh my God, these are like 8 different logos and this and that. And I'm like, what am I going to do? And it's not consistent. So I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I need people to know me for who I am. My brand recognition is going to be my name, because that's the consistent part in anything I do.
Right.
So if anyone finds me in my name, and we were talking about this on the last podcast, I'm like, it doesn't matter if I'm a plumber or in 20 years I become an electrician, or in 30 years I become an auto mechanic. It doesn't matter. If you see my name, you'll have a certain set of things that you think.
Right.
And whether it's a value, a quality, a sense of service, whatever it is. So if I just put everything behind that, then I don't have to worry about what vehicle I'm using to provide service. I mean, everyone knows me for my name.
I think it's so exciting because I think that we are, like, I realized that when I became a photographer, I started grappling with the identity of being a photographer and what qualifies me and what, you know, constitutes, because that's not what I got my degree in, and I'm learning on YouTube. And so like we were talking about imposter syndrome, but when am I actually a photographer? Do I get a certificate? And there was like different, you know, you could get this licensing through, or you could be part of a network, and, you know, all these things that cost, that cost money. And, you know, when you're like poor and starting out and you need all of the equipment and all of the all of the things, nobody really cares what certifications that you have. They want to know if you can take a good photo.
That's a hard truth.
That's
a hard truth in all lines, like in investments and real estate and everything. There's all these like accolades you could have and stuff, and like, okay, do I go for this one and this one? And if I don't,
are people going to think I'm not, you know, qualified or good enough or any of those things? And there's just such a balance to strike there. But I think what's exciting for the future is that I think even after reading just a couple of books, and just doing that work, I started to take the confines off as to my identity being a photographer. And so even as I'm going forward in the future, I may not be a photographer any longer, but that's okay. And I started to tell myself, so we were just talking about whether people let us do it or not, and giving ourselves the allowance to think bigger and to dream bigger and to take the confines off. Like, I can do whatever.
Right. I mean, like, to me, you come across as more like photography is your skill set right now. And like, that's like, I would say that's like the core of how you're building out this idea. But in essence, what you're going to end up having to become is not just a photographer. You're going to end up being like a creative. Yeah. And that's like a creative director almost, you know?
Yeah. I hope. I mean, there's so many different,
I think
names that we can,
You know, like, I mean, because you have to be
photographers are called creatives. They're in the, like, graphic designers and, people who are styling things. Like, okay, if you're a creative, which like so many people are creative, but that was one of the buzz titles. But I think it's just seeing a camera as a tool.
Yes.
You know, different avenues that you're helping people as a tool, but it's still, money. Like, people are going to want you now even for a couple of different areas, right? So I'm sure, like, as you became a realtor, like, some of your same clients, like you're saying, you saw the crossover, you see the correlation. So you're probably not going to be a plumber. Yeah. Probably not going to be an electrician.
Yeah, and then that was my, like, my extreme example
But I think what people need to start thinking for themselves is, hey, there's these other things that are right there that are parallel with what I'm already doing that I can jump into.
Yes.
And hey, writing a book is one of the, like, there's so many ways now that people are writing books that are really cool. People are just transcribing them, being able to just voice, like using Voxer to, I have a friend who did that. Yeah. Super cool.
There's different ways to do it, and I mean, deep down inside, when I was growing up, I always thought of myself, I mean, I was good at things if I focused on them, but that didn't mean I liked it. Like, so growing up, I was okay in math. I was pretty good, and then I lost interest, so I got terrible at it. But I always came back to writing as something I just enjoyed doing because. And I always thought of myself, no, if I had all the money in the world, I'll just sit there and identify as a writer, if I could.
Yeah.
But, you have circumstances, you have relationships, you develop relationships, and then, I became good at working with people and just being around people. And so I just got into sales and all these different things. And then naturally, when you're in sales, you're talking about money all the time and this and that. And it's like, okay, well, let's go to the source of the money. I'm going to work at a bank, so it's like, it's a very predictive mindset, but it all came down to, well, okay, after I do all this, I'm just going to be a writer. For me, like that
Yeah.
was my like background thing. Like once I
Right.
have the millions and billions and I don't have to worry about work, I'm just going to write stuff because it doesn't matter if it sells,
Uh-huh.
because that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So like we all have this internal thing that we kind of just want to do because it's interesting to us at the time. And I
Right.
never thought of myself as someone who was passionate about anything particularly, which was kind of odd because everyone's like, follow your passion and this and that. And, you know, Mike Rose said something that really stuck with me. He says, don't follow your passion, but just bring it with you.
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
You know, and that hit me like, that's exactly what I always wanted to,
Yeah.
like, that's what I wanted to do. That's what I want to do. Like, I'll be passionate in whatever I do
Yeah.
and I'll be good at it because I'm putting my intention into it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean I don't have to love it,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I think another word is calling,
Right.
know, and that's a big one in the church world,
Yeah.
of like calling. And like, as I went into working in ministry, it's like people would say, well, when God calls you, he doesn't uncall you.
Right.
So it's like this, if you leave that occupation, it's almost like you're walking away from the calling that you had on your life.
Right.
And so there's like
That's
a
a
lot.
tough programming.
It's a lot
Yeah.
of emotional stuff to kind of go through, because both my husband and I didn't go back at all to working in a church, but we had to reconcile this. Like, God didn't uncall us.
Yeah.
You're not like wherever you go, there you are.
Right.
And God is bigger than that.
Right.
Like he's still with you and in you. And so I don't know, there was a lot of identity stuff with that I think we both had to wrestle through. And
It's tough,
Yeah.
especially with not only internally, but like the society around you,
Right.
Your own sphere,
Right.
and judgment and everything else. It's like, that book kind of writes itself,
Right.
in terms of how difficult that can be.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's identity. Again, it's like what you say about yourself, how you see yourself. And I think that's I had this quote that I was looking at. I think after all of it, so there's like looking at yourself with sober judgment, understanding your strengths and weaknesses, who you are, and then it's getting out of the way. Then it's like getting yourself out of the way.
Yeah,
in
your
order
own
to-
like programming out of the way.
Yes, because otherwise you're just, who was it? Flannery O'Connor, she said, to know oneself is, above all, to know what one lacks, to measure oneself against truth and not the other way around. The first product of self-knowledge is humility. And like just having humility with how we help each other, because I think that's humility and understanding what we lack as well as what we're good at helps us need each other and not become an island
Yeah.
to ourselves.
Right.
Like, I don't need anyone or anything.
Right.
We're very differently, uniquely gifted and talented, and we work the best together. And so I think that's where it's like having that understanding about yourself and where you fit within everybody is really appreciating the gifts and strengths that other people have.
Right. Yeah, and I think we focus so much on those things like, oh, I don't have this, or I
Yes.
don't have that.
Yeah.
And I feel like, or I don't need that, or I don't need that ever,
Right.
like, and I feel like when you put yourself, your self-imposed restraints become your prison. It's just whatever you kind of focus on, whatever that is, that becomes the thing that dictates everything you do.
What you focus on,
Yeah.
you create more of.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's a Jen Sincero, and she says it over and over and again. What you focus on, you create more of.
Right.
Create more of.
Yeah.
And so when a lot of the anxiety struggles, a lot of the stress struggles, are due to the lack and the what I'm not good at, and
Right.
all of those what if.
Yeah. So how does that, so bringing that all into what you're doing now, like, well, one thing I wanted to say before I forget is having this like internal battle that I had about branding and everything is what got me on the search to look for what I eventually found your work, is because I'm like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing I'm seeking service for? Like, I
Right.
want like a different type of photos. I want different types of branding. I'm like, what is this? I was like trying to create a word for it.
Yeah.
And I just started like, and I'm like, all right, well, let me just start with people I know. And I started going on Facebook. I'm like, who's taking pro photos and posting them up and stuff? And we have a common friend that I started seeing her photos, and I'm like, oh, these are nice, and they're not necessarily specific to business. I'm like, what is this? You know. So then I saw your accreditation and stuff. I'm like, okay, let me follow her stuff. I'm like, all right, Sarah Hoag, who's this? And then I went to your Facebook, and then I went to your website, and then that was like that. Holy shit! This is exactly what I was trying to articulate in terms of what I'm looking for in terms of service, but like the way. It wasn't even like the layout of your website. It was the copy, I think, that got me, because I was like, the way you described lifestyle branding, which to me, I didn't know that word.
Well, I kind of made it up.
Well,
too.
yeah. Like I'm like, that's, and I thought it through. I'm like, lifestyle branding. I'm like, that's it. I'm like, that's exactly what I was trying to look for. And I'm like, she's a lifestyle branding photographer. Yeah. I'm like, this is exactly what I was like trying to articulate. And
that's so awesome.
Then I started seeing like, you know, the stuff you had in your portfolio with that intent. And I'm like, this is the kind of stuff, like she already gets the premise or like the theme of what we're trying to go after. Right.
Yeah. As I was trying to, you know, so light bulbs went on as I was developing the business side, as I was already hanging out with other entrepreneurs and people. Those were my friendships. Those were the main friendships that I developed as I moved out here, because I was focusing on business,
on your work,
on what it was going to be. And so as it like emerged, it's funny how like even what I'm working on now with personal branding, like I said, I don't have the language around it. You know what it is, but then you have to develop those ideas and it's already happening, but you can't identify exactly how you say it. And so now there's more brand photographers, but a lot of photographers that you go on and you say brand, they're working for like a lot of product type brands.
Right. Yeah. Which is a different thing.
And then now there's more, you know, people want to Google search other photographers like me that are like personal brand photographers, but they still do a lot of like studio headshot, and I'm big on lifestyle, like in your life, what do you do? In
your element.
What are the things that you do in the day, so that if you're sharing about different parts of your business, then we can illustrate them and kind of have just all of this arsenal of imagery that you can go, oh, I want to talk about this, but what do I make a graphic, or do I just post another photo of me? Well, maybe there's something in there that like illustrates it a little bit more. You know, if it's a deep thought that you have, or an actual part of the service that you provide for people in as it's happening. You clean chimneys.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, because I do work with a lot of service-based businesses.
Right.
And so I just kind of came up with lifestyle branding for business, or I called it business branding.
Right.
And then now it's more on the personal branding, because I realize that's what I get fueled with a little bit more.
Yeah. That's what you enjoy.
That's what I enjoy the most. Yeah. Yeah. It's not always the one that pays the bills, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's different, because people that would approach you with that idea, right? Hey, I want to create a brand around myself, or whatever it is, or like I just want more stuff around me in my element. That's not a business intent, you know, so all of that is just a sheer cost to them to have, and they may or may not have a plan on how to use it yet.
In the world of entrepreneurs now, though, and social media, I feel like people get it. And I'm always looking for people that, when I start talking about it, like the way that you were explaining, you already know that you need it. Yeah. And so there has been, that's the best compliment in the world, going, I've been looking for someone like you.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it was. And honestly, it's one of the only times I've been able to say that to someone is that like I was looking for what you do.
That's so cool.
Because like when you're an entrepreneur, when you're doing your own thing, it's a lonely sphere. Like if you don't get up in the morning, great, no one's gonna bug you about it. You know, like if you don't do this, then great, you may not get paid, and even if you do it, great, you may still not get paid. You know, like there's all these different obstacles, but it was one of those things where I'm like, no, this is a very obvious elephant in the room for me in terms of what I need to kind of accomplish or work towards. Like I don't know what it looks like yet, but like let's start somewhere. And trying to put it to words is the first way to, well, how do I describe what I'm looking for? And until I describe what I'm looking for, no one will know what I'm talking about, you know? So like, that was like my search for it. And I think it was just, it's so serendipitous to, you know, come across it in the right time and all those different things, because I feel like that's where I think a lot of people in small businesses the only way to differentiate yourself is that way. Because, you know, there's so many people doing the same thing.
Yeah. And I think that's a big mindset shift is, okay, after, you know, it doesn't always happen overnight, but like after kind of putting the things in, like the information and really letting that wash over you and not focus too hard, because you can't make things happen.
Yes.
And so when you allow things to happen and you open yourself up to all of this different information, then I was able to go, okay, I can transform this from the inside out. And when I did that, my competition went away.
Yeah.
I didn't feel the imposter syndrome, because it was really just me and how I wanted to help people. And then by doing that, I meet someone like you, I come on your podcast, maybe I'll meet somebody else after this.
Sure.
And so then there's putting out your intention in your work and in what you want to do, and then creating it that way. I could just be trying to get as many headshots, you know, for
Right.
businesses as possible,
Sure.
and feeling like stressed out that what's going to be next, rather
Right.
than going, telling people my favorite thing to do is like meet someone at even a networking event, or listening to what they do and getting visuals immediately as they're talking.
Just
and then,
based on what they're saying.
just what
Yeah,
they're saying and
yeah.
like what they do. And because I like to ask even more questions, so they're giving more. And then I'll say, you know, what would be awesome is if you did, you know, if you got photos of this, or how you help, you know, and if they want to take that information and go with another photographer, or have their husband take the pictures or whatever, zero.
Yep. Whatever.
Albeit,
Zero expectations.
But I was able to add value right
Yeah.
away to their business and to them, and
give them an angle that they didn't get
yes,
yet. Yeah.
and so then they'll remember me and most likely book me
Yeah.
if it's a good fit, you know,
Right.
so to speak. But that's been so exciting and fun.
And liberating, probably.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Because it's not like, oh, you should take family photos. You really should.
Right.
You should take some family photos.
Right.
I don't know. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't have to. I stopped taking weddings when I did this. And that was a big identity shift for I think for the way that people looked at me. Like, I had people reaching out, oh, will you take weddings? I'll say, I don't take weddings anymore, except for existing clients. I have had... you know, a friend of a client, I'm a past client that is like, you know, really asking me to do their wedding, and then I'll, you know, cave and say, okay, make an exception, because my work doesn't display weddings any longer,
Right.
or, you know, that, because they'll be like, why, you don't like them? You don't like
Right.
weddings? And,
Right.
you know, so right away they want to kind of peg you as a cynical, you know.
Yeah, or whatever.
But you have to focus on some area. Sure. And for me, that was like, there's enough people focusing on it that are doing a great job.
Right. Yeah, no. And that's a huge decision, especially when you're not like all rich and famous. Like these are like business decisions that are going to cost you money, you know, at least in the short term.
Right. At the moment. But again, you say no to something, you know, every time you say no to something, you're saying yes to something else, and you're creating opportunity for other things.
Yeah, a no is a yes to another question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really believe, that you're just opening up space. That is so liberating and still so scary.
It is.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, like, again, like they say, the proverbial they, imperial they,
those
they are all of the, you know, the education that's helping, the wisdom. I think the wisdom is what sticks. With all of those voices, you're not, you know, with educating yourself, you're going to hear truth and you're going to hear wisdom, and that doesn't return void. That doesn't go away. You don't always remember who said what, but it's in you when you allow yourself to learn more or grow. So that's exciting.
Yeah, no, that is, when I think of the work that you're doing, it's exciting to me because I always feel like I have more fun being in more of a creative mindset, you know? And I just see everywhere you can take it, and it's going to be really cool to see. I mean, I know you haven't announced anything yet, but I have a little teaser in terms of an idea of what you're working on, and I think it's going to be really cool.
I'm excited. Yeah, it'll be like a personal branding, full profile, portfolio type thing for people, but I haven't exactly explained how that's going to work.
Talk to me a little bit about your challenges in being a photographer for people and their expectations of what they want to see versus what you see and what you take and all that, because I know working with you, like, I had those same like moments, just internally. So like how does that play out for you?
I think each person's different. So anytime you work with a client, everyone's individual. You should have, a process that's the same, but the individual's different. And so really listening and getting in their head about how they see themselves. So the questions that I ask hopefully start the conversation, then I have a consultation with them. And then self-perception's a big thing. So there's some people who are really like, they like every single photo
you
take. And you're like, maybe not that one. Because I'm showing the person back. For a while, there was a good amount of photographers that are like, you're not allowed to see anything until I've completely edited it.
Everything.
And, okay. But if you're trying to get a gauge on how the person sees themselves, like, I am confident enough at this point that I know what I think looks good, and I would say the majority of people would agree with me on that, right? So, like, if you have an I or the I, you're saying, oh, I think this looks good. But not everyone feels that about themselves. And so you have to understand what insecurities and what strengths, because sometimes there's a photo, like, say it's a serious look.
Right.
That's a hard one to nail. So if the person is making a serious face to them and then you show them back, they can either be like, oh, no, or they can say, oh, yeah, I really like it. And I may or may not even have agreed with whether or not that serious face looked
serious or not. Yeah.
I may think, well, I think what I'm good at is reading the emotion behind it. So if you kind of look like you might want to laugh when you're making that serious face or something,
you kind of see it.
I see it and I feel it, and I think other people will too. But if the client or the person really likes that, I 100% respect. There's always this give and take between photographer and client of what the end result will be. It's a collaborative thing. So if people just leave it up to the photographer to, oh, you take good pictures, just take good pictures of me.
Right, yeah.
Then that may or may, your expectation of what they end up being may not be the real thing.
Right.
Then I have the really hyper-focused on appearance, type people that are asking me right away to Photoshop everything and, can you make me look thinner? Can you make me look thinner? Could you maybe make my arm look thinner?
Right.
Could you, I understand maybe not liking your nose or liking your profile. Right. I think people need profile shots more than they think and just a somewhat side profile doesn't have to be like 100%. But if you're just used to seeing yourself on your phone in a selfie, then you don't have a full idea of yourself. I had one client.
That's a vulnerable space to be in.
It's very vulnerable.
Yeah.
I respect it. Yeah. I totally respect the way that they feel. And when I get in front of the camera, I feel vulnerable too. And so it's a really great wake up and reminder for me to understand how the person might be feeling. But I like to laugh those nerves off. Yeah. But I had one client say, why did I wait so long? I feel like I'm seeing myself for the first time, like really seeing myself. And it was so cool because we see ourselves in the mirror. That's one angle. And we see ourselves on our phone, and like most people like just taking one photo out in front. We don't see ourselves really in action, in our lives or what we're doing. And so I think it's liberating, honestly, if you just say, this is what it is, trusting your photographer to not give you totally awful, because we know that, I don't know, there's a lot of people that have had a photo shoot where they're going through it and maybe they feel really good about it, and then they see the photos after and they're like, oh no,
Right.
that is not at all how I felt or what
Right.
I thought it looked like me running a half marathon.
Yeah.
I felt amazing on those last 3 miles, and then I saw the photos like,
You're like,
whoa,
I look like I'm dying.
I was
Yeah.
dying. But it's this dance. I just think it's this back and forth, and then I let people know I will. It's not Photoshop. It's Lightroom.
Right.
Most photographers use Lightroom.
Just touch up.
And so I
Yeah.
don't even use Photoshop.
Right.
And so what I've had happen a few times is people put their images into an app, and they squeeze their face.
Right.
And
yeah.
they make their
You
eyes.
can do it on your phone now.
Yes.
Like, you know.
Make your
yeah.
eyes bigger, your nose smaller, your
Right.
teeth.
Yeah.
It's.
People will do what they want.
Yeah, what's
Right.
the word for like the way you see yourself? The body dysmorphic,
Yeah.
dysmorphic syndrome or something.
It's a weird thing because like you feel there's aspects to seeing yourself, and I don't know if this is actually scientifically true, but like, you know, I've heard people say like if you ran into yourself on the streets, you wouldn't recognize yourself. Like scientifically, your face, like you wouldn't
Wow.
recognize yourself.
Wow.
And I've heard that a lot in a scientific way, like expressed, that you wouldn't recognize yourself if you just bumped. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't know that was you,
Yeah.
which is so shocking to me. But I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't know, because like there are even people who feel like, and I feel like I'm more of a kind of a laid back person. Like, you know, I know there's certain angles of my face that I like to look at more than others.
Sure.
And, you know, I joke with my wife, I'm like, what the hell's wrong with my face? You know, like in a photo, and she's like, no, this is my favorite one. And like the one she likes usually is like not
Yes. The one
anything.
you like,
I'm like,
yeah.
that's the one I was about to delete, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just this perception of what you think you look like or should look like. And it's a hard thing because it's not like something you're changing.
Right. Right. And now, like, I think the number one excuse that women say to me is, oh, I'm going to lose weight first. So I'll say, when? What's your date? Because if you are, 200 pounds, if you are 180, if you are 150, like, this is me at this weight.
Right.
This is me at this weight. This is me at this weight. You're not gonna like just delete the years. Like, I think so many people can look back on their childhood photos and go, where'd mom go for these years?
Yeah, yeah.
She's usually the one taking the photos, but she's also probably the one that didn't want to get into it.
Right.
Because a lot of women flex with their weight up and down.
Sure.
And then they don't want to be in the photos. Well, don't let those dark years go by of not getting in photos or not being present or not being seen.
Yeah.
Because you're not happy with your weight. Your value is not the number on the scale. And so if you're at that weight then and want to take photos and you lose a bunch of weight and you feel great, then take photos again.
And it's
Then
going to be a different energy, a different context, and everything else. It's not like, let's go to that same corner and...
A lot of people
know.
who lose weight will look at a photo and go, I don't even recognize that girl or that guy. And I say, well, they're still you. Go ahead and love that person.
Sure.
Look at that photo and don't be in disgust,
Yeah.
but love that person and take them with you so that you don't have such a detachment
Yeah.
from who you are. Because
That's funny. Like, people perceive themselves in different ways. It's funny you mention it because I think there's a thing there. Hold on, let me think about this. I do this thing in photos where I see a photo of myself, and more than what I look like in that photo, I immediately get a recall of where I was mentally first. Like, that hits me first, then like the actual photo.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, oh, I was in such a shitty place right there. Or, oh, like, I remember that was right after this promotion, and okay. Like,
Oh, yeah.
like what a photo does to me, it brings me to that place I was. And then it's like, oh, let me look at the photo itself. Like, oh, that was a terrible shirt, or whatever,
yeah.
But,
Well, a lot of moms will say, like, oh, Sarah, you made our family photo look so good. That morning was so stressful and awful. And, like,
Right.
Jonathan threw up in the car and, like, whatever.
Right.
It's just... And so that actually had inspired me to try and take steps to help families before they would show up
Like
relax.
Yeah.
Because
It's huge.
there's a lot of people who.
I mean, I know you're like, do you want a whiskey or something?
Yeah.
Let's just chat for a little bit on my session. I'm like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, because it's, I've suggested people drink all the time.
Yeah, it kind of loosens the nerves a little bit.
Especially if you're going to a place like a hotel that has a bar.
Yeah.
Sometimes taking a photo there of whatever their favorite drink is really fun.
Right.
And again, I think it just goes back to we're multifaceted. There's not just one side of us, which is our LinkedIn profile pic, there's many parts, and we live in this visual world, and people want to see so that they can know you a little bit more. So you have the ability to curate what that is, and you can curate that in your business with your language, how you want to explain what you do. I had somebody in a group that I just sell insurance. She said that,
Right.
Oh, I just sell insurance.
Right.
Of course, go up to her after. I'm like, honey, you do not just sell insurance.
Yeah. No, it's tough.
People,
we tie our identity to what we do.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's like a never-ending struggle for everyone.
Yeah.
But
I think there is a way of getting above it.
Mm-hmm. Do you see it happening? Like, I mean, I feel like you're one of those like pillars to remind people like you're not what you do, because in photography that you're kind of showing people for who they are. Mm-hmm. I mean, they might be doing something that they like their work, but you're kind of showing their own personality. Like that's what I felt like I was trying to get into with you in terms of like, here's what I do. I'm an author. I do this, and this, but like I want to kind of showcase my personality in terms of where mentally I feel like I am in my career right now and all these different things.
I think it's this combo continually of like knowing yourself, like getting to know yourself and then letting go of yourself. It's like both, all the time. So I love the Enneagram, which is the typing personality type system. And so like Myers-Briggs or any of those things where, you kind of, love languages, all of those things, they're tools. They're just things to kind of help you see yourself, but not for the purpose of like an excuse or this is who I am, so F off, but going, okay, I'm getting me, but I'm also getting you, and I'm getting you, and I'm getting you, and I'm seeing how we're all working together, and then I'm letting go. Like, I think the number one thing in marriage that helps is appreciation. So they always say appreciation fuels intimacy, and what happens when marriages go bad is you're starting to be like, you don't get me, you don't understand me, or you don't appreciate me. And so as the more you can understand what your strengths and weaknesses and the reason opposites attract and are able to appreciate the other person, the more that your marriage will do well and grow because you're an appreciation zone.
Sure.
So if you do that with other people and you're like, oh my gosh, I could never do like what Josh, my husband, does. He does certain things, and it's like he's my IT guy or just fixes all of the cords, I would probably spend 10 hours doing that he does in 20 minutes.
Right.
I'm like, oh, you're amazing.
Yeah. Right. Just the complementary aspect of a relationship.
Yeah, and that leads back to that quote that's humility. I can't do this all on my own. I know where I am good, but we need each other. And so it's seeing ourselves in a good way that lets us complement one another.
Sure. No, that's really cool.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening. If this episode made you think and you wish to reach out with a comment or a question, record your voice and send us the file at socialfabricpodcast@gmail.com or record yourself on my website. I'll provide the links in the show notes below. Be sure to follow this podcast on Facebook and Twitter, and also join the exclusive Social Fabric Facebook group and engage with other listeners from around the world. Until the next one, be well.